why AI models hallucinate. So hallucination is when, from day-to-day usage of AI, when it will simply make something up. So if you ask for a fact, an AI will often very confidently give you an answer, which is completely untrue. This has been improved and ameliorated over the last couple of years by the fact that we now have search embedded directly into all of our large language models. Now you can actually go and get citations, you can get websites, you can pull in information from the internet. That helps a lot. That used to be Perplexity's big differentiator. That is no longer the case. All these models can do it now. However, they do still hallucinate. They will still make up information. And this paper, which has just come out from OpenAI, it's mainly from OpenAI and a guy at Georgia Tech, is talking about why this might be the case. Now, the big insight that they have come to, and I think is really interesting because it's also an admission. The big insight in this paper is that because we test all of our AI models with benchmarks, we have tests, we have things like LM Arena, etc. We have basically standardized tests for these large language models. We are overfitting to those particular rubrics. So we are building models that do well in these tests, because doing well in tests is what allows you to launch and for people to be impressed with your model. What is happening specifically, so it's not just overfitting to the test, it is specifically the fact that if you say, I do not know in one of these tests, then you will get marked a 0 generally. That means that these models are disincentivized from saying, I do not know the answer to that. And instead, they come up with something plausible sounding that may be right, which allows them to score better in the tests. So the fact that OpenAI has put forward this paper, they published this paper, paid for the research and gone ahead and published it and are now promoting it, shows that they know that the benchmarks, that the testing, that releasing all of these kind of metrics before you launch is harmful. It's harmful for the industry because it means that the AIs will never tell us that they don't know because they get a 0 score. So what they're suggesting in this paper is we need to change those tests, or we need to stop relying on the tests quite as much. So it's a bit like a student who is prepared for an exam. They cram everything into their head. They know exactly how to answer questions in a way that gets them points, but they're not actually learning anything. They're not actually improving themselves. And as soon as they're out of that test chamber, they stop thinking. Test chamber, we don't call it that. The exam hall. Test chamber is very scientific. We're seeing the same thing with large language models. So we need to change the metrics. We need to change the tests that we put them through to allow for I do not know answers, or even to reward I do not know answers when the answer is not known. So I think this is quite an important paper because it will change how we think of intelligence, how we think of what is a good model and what is not a good model. Because recently there were examples of GPT-5 coming out with answers which were, I don't know the answer to that. And that was seen as a breath of fresh air. So instead of making something up, which generally a model would do, it would just say, no, I have no idea. I do not know the answer. And then it would point you in the direction of where you might find out that answer. I personally prefer that. And I'm sure a lot of people would, because it allows us to use these models more confidently, knowing that it isn't just making stuff up, which is one of the major and very real problems with large language models right now. So I think this is incredibly refreshing, not only that they've worked out what is going on and they're asking for changes, but the fact that they are admitting, OpenAI are admitting, we, including OpenAI, we as an industry, we have been focusing too much on these tests and focusing too much on making sure we do really well in these tests. We need to relax on that and focus on what is most useful for the user at the end, rather than what's good for the test, which I think is incredibly refreshing. Let's see if they actually change how they act. Because if they do worse in the tests, it requires everyone to make new tests together or to agree not to do the old tests. So it's going to be a bit of a shift moving forward. We'll see. It's refreshing to see, but I don't know if it will actually change anything yet.